In the early hours of January 3, 2026, the world witnessed one of the most audacious military operations since the capture of Osama bin Laden. American Delta Force operators, supported by over 150 aircraft, descended upon downtown Caracas, Venezuela, to capture President Nicolás Maduro. But this operation was far more than a simple arrest mission. It was a devastating demonstration of American technological supremacy over Russian and Chinese military systems. What happened that night exposed the catastrophic failure of billions of dollars worth of Russian air defense systems and Chinese radar technology that were supposed to protect Venezuela. This is the story of how the United States methodically defeated its three major adversaries, Russia, China, and Iran, not on the traditional battlefield, but through intelligence supremacy and technological dominance. Before we dive in, why not hit subscribe and drop a like? It really helps out. All right, let's keep going. For years, Venezuela had positioned itself as a fortress against American power in the Western Hemisphere, protected by an air defense network that cost over $2 billion. The Maduro government had purchased Russia's vaunted S-300VM surface-to-air missile systems, which Moscow marketed as capable of shooting down even the most advanced American aircraft. Alongside these Russian systems stood China's JY-27A radar network, which Beijing claimed could detect stealth aircraft like the F-22 Raptor and F-35 Lightning from over 300 kilometers away. Venezuela also possessed Russian Buk M2E medium-range missiles, Pantsir S-1 gun missile systems specifically designed to destroy drones and helicopters, and Chinese FK-3 missile batteries. Military analysts around the world considered this layered air defense system to be South America's most formidable, a shield that would make any American intervention extremely costly. But on that fateful January night, every single one of these systems failed catastrophically. Not a single missile was fired against the American aircraft. The story of this intelligence and military victory began months earlier, in August 2025, when the CIA quietly inserted a small team into Venezuela. These intelligence operatives had a singular mission: develop extraordinary insight into Maduro's daily patterns, movements, habits, and security arrangements. The CIA team built what intelligence professionals call a pattern of life profile, tracking where Maduro slept, what he ate, where he traveled, and even the names of his pets. This human intelligence network included a source who had penetrated Maduro's inner circle, providing real-time updates on the Venezuelan president's location and activities. While the CIA gathered intelligence on the ground, American reconnaissance aircraft began mapping Venezuela's entire air defense architecture from above. The stealthy RQ-170 Sentinel drone, the same platform used in the bin Laden operation, flew undetected over Venezuelan territory collecting signals intelligence. Every time a Venezuelan radar operator turned on their system, American sensors recorded the electromagnetic signature, building a comprehensive picture of the defense network. Meanwhile, the United States began a visible military buildup in the Caribbean that served a dual purpose: pressuring Maduro while masking the covert preparations for the strike. In mid-November 2025, the USS Gerald R. Ford, America's most advanced aircraft carrier, arrived in the Caribbean along with its entire strike group. F-35 and F-22 fighters deployed to Roosevelt Roads Naval Station in Puerto Rico, establishing a forward operating base just 700 miles from Caracas. The Vermont Air National Guard sent F-35A aircraft specifically trained in suppression of enemy air defenses, the same unit that had honed its skills against Russian-made systems. Marines from the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit embarked aboard the USS Iwo Jima Amphibious Ready Group, providing a rapid reaction force if the operation encountered resistance. By early December, military planners had assembled enough force to overwhelm Venezuela's defenses, but they still needed to solve the most critical problem: locating Maduro precisely. The Venezuelan president had become increasingly paranoid, moving between multiple locations and maintaining unpredictable schedules to avoid becoming a target. This is where the CIA's human source proved invaluable: providing confirmation that Maduro would be at his residence in central Caracas on the night of January 2nd. President Trump approved the operation before Christmas, but weather delays pushed the execution date several times as planners waited for optimal conditions. On January 2nd, 2026, conditions finally aligned. A narrow weather window that skilled pilots could navigate through ocean, mountains, and low cloud cover. At exactly 10:46 p.m. Eastern Time, President Trump issued the order that would set everything in motion, saying simply, "Good luck and Godspeed." Within minutes, aircraft began launching from 20 different bases across the Western Hemisphere, converging on Venezuela in a carefully choreographed aerial ballet. The first phase of the operation targeted Venezuela's eyes and ears, the radar systems that could detect incoming aircraft and coordinate defensive responses. EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft began flooding the electromagnetic spectrum with jamming signals so powerful that Venezuelan radar screens filled with static and noise. The Chinese JY-27A radars, which were supposed to detect stealth aircraft through their meter-wave frequencies, immediately began malfunctioning under the electronic assault. The radar operators, many of whom were poorly trained conscripts who had not been paid in months, watched helplessly as their screens became useless. When they attempted to increase power to burn through the jamming, they made a fatal mistake. Their radar emissions became beacons for American anti-radiation missiles. High-speed anti-radiation missiles streaked toward the radar sites, destroying the transmitters and killing the operator's ability to see the incoming American aircraft. Simultaneously, American cyber warfare teams executed attacks on Venezuela's power grid, plunging much of Caracas into darkness and crippling military communications. The S-300VM batteries around the capital, which theoretically could track 24 targets simultaneously, found themselves fighting a digital seizure. The Russian-designed systems had been built for the flat terrain of Eastern Europe, not the mountainous coast of Venezuela, where terrain masking rendered them vulnerable. American Tomahawk cruise missiles flew through valleys using nap-of-the-earth tactics, popping up over ridgelines with only seconds of exposure before impact. By the time the S-300 operators detected the incoming missiles, they were already too close to engage. The kill chain had been broken before it could even begin. The Pantsir S-1 systems, specifically designed to destroy the very helicopters that would carry Delta Force to Maduro, sat silent throughout the entire operation. Not a single Russian or Chinese system fired a shot. $2 billion of advanced military hardware reduced to expensive scrap metal in less than 20 minutes. With Venezuelan air defenses neutralized, the second phase began, inserting the extraction force into the heart of Caracas to capture Maduro himself. Helicopters from the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the legendary Night Stalkers, crossed into Venezuelan airspace flying at barely 100 feet above the waves. These MH-60M Blackhawks and MH-47G Chinooks carried Delta Force operators, FBI hostage rescue team members, and Department of Justice personnel authorized to execute the arrest. The Night Stalkers had practiced this exact mission for months, using a full-scale replica of Maduro's compound built from intelligence gathered by CIA ground teams. At 2:01 a.m. local time, the helicopters arrived at Maduro's residence while F-22s and F-35s circled overhead, providing continuous protection against any Venezuelan response. Maduro's wife, Celia Flores, heard the aircraft approaching and reportedly said to her husband, "I think I hear aircraft outside." But by then it was already too late. Delta Force operators were 3 minutes from breaching the compound when the Venezuelan leader first became aware of the danger. The helicopters came under small arms fire from Maduro's security detail, but responded with overwhelming force while maintaining their approach. One helicopter was hit by gunfire but remained flyable, a testament to both the aircraft's resilience and the pilot's extraordinary skill under fire. Delta Force operators breached Maduro's security perimeter using specialized cutting torches capable of slicing through reinforced steel doors rather than explosives. The Venezuelan president attempted to flee to a heavily fortified safe room, but American forces reached him before he could seal himself inside. Within minutes, both Maduro and his wife were in American custody, handcuffed and being escorted to the waiting helicopters. Since you've made it this far, you're clearly enjoying the content, so please hit subscribe and drop a like. It helps more than you think. Now, let's get back to it. The extraction phase proved equally dangerous, with multiple self-defense engagements as the force withdrew through Venezuelan airspace. Fighter jets and armed drones provided suppressive fire while the helicopters raced toward the Caribbean with their prisoners. At 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time, the force crossed back over international waters with Maduro aboard the USS Iwo Jima. The entire operation had taken less than 3 hours. 7 American service members were wounded during the operation, but remarkably not a single American life was lost in this extraordinarily complex mission. The capture of Maduro was significant on its own, but the broader implications of the operation sent shockwaves through Moscow and Beijing. This was not the first time in recent months that Russian air defense systems had failed catastrophically against Western military power. In June 2025, Israel had launched Operation Rising Lion against Iran, systematically dismantling Tehran's Russian-supplied S-300 air defense network. Israeli F-35 jets penetrated Iranian airspace with impunity, striking nuclear facilities, military bases, and killing top Revolutionary Guard commanders. The Iranian S-300 systems, which Tehran had purchased from Moscow specifically to defend against Israeli and American attacks, proved completely ineffective. Israeli intelligence had spent years preparing the battlefield, including pre-positioning drone systems inside Iran that activated simultaneously with the main air attack. The attack on Iran's S-300 batteries began in October 2024, when Israel destroyed one system in retaliation for an Iranian missile barrage. By the time Operation Rising Lion commenced in June 2025, Israel had already neutralized all 4 of Iran's remaining S-300 batteries. American officials privately described Iran as essentially naked and defenseless against future aerial attacks after the Israeli operation concluded. The 12-day Israel-Iran war demonstrated that sophisticated electronic warfare and stealth technology could render even advanced Russian air defenses useless. Ukraine had been proving this point on a smaller scale throughout 2025, launching increasingly audacious drone attacks deep into Russian territory. Operation Spiderweb in June 2025 saw Ukrainian intelligence smuggle over 100 drones into Russia itself using unsuspecting truck drivers. These small quadcopters attacked Russian strategic bomber bases across 5 time zones, damaging aircraft that formed the backbone of Russia's nuclear deterrent. Russian air defenses, supposedly designed to protect the motherland from exactly this type of attack, failed to prevent drones from reaching targets over 4,000 kilometers from Ukraine. By December 2025, Ukraine was launching record numbers of drones against Russian targets, with over 4,000 shot down in that month alone, but many more were getting through. Moscow's airports were repeatedly shut down by drone attacks, with citizens forced to shelter while air defenses struggled to cope with the aerial onslaught. The Venezuela operation confirmed a devastating pattern. Russian air defense systems designed to counter American technology were failing everywhere they faced real combat conditions. Military analysts pointed to several reasons for these failures, starting with the fundamental design philosophy behind Russian systems. The S-300 was designed for the flat, open terrain of Eastern Europe, where radar can see aircraft climbing to altitude from hundreds of kilometers away. Venezuela's coastal mountains, like Iran's complex geography, created dead zones where American aircraft could approach undetected until seconds before impact. More critically, Russian systems require extensive training and maintenance that many export customers simply cannot provide. Venezuelan operators may have received Russian manuals translated into Spanish, but they lacked the years of integrated training needed to operate the systems effectively. When American electronic warfare flooded their screens with hundreds of false targets, these operators froze rather than executing the complex countermeasures required. The Chinese radar systems suffered from similar fundamental problems that became apparent only when tested against real American combat power. Beijing had marketed the JY-27A as a stealth killer, capable of detecting low observable aircraft through resonance effects caused by meter-wave frequencies. In theory, the physics behind this claim has some validity. Very high-frequency radars can detect aircraft that shorter wavelength systems might miss. But detection is worthless without the ability to track targets precisely enough to guide missiles to intercept them, and this is where the Chinese systems failed. The JY-27A's angular resolution proved far too poor to provide weapons-quality tracking data to the Russian missile systems it was supposed to support. American stealth aircraft simply flew through what was supposed to be an impenetrable sensor network undetected until they had already completed their mission. The Venezuelan operation exposed another critical vulnerability: the lack of integration between Chinese and Russian systems in real combat conditions. On paper, the Venezuelan air defense network looked formidable, multiple layers of radar coverage feeding data to various missile batteries. In practice, the systems had never been tested together against a sophisticated adversary, and the seams between them proved fatal. When American cyber warfare disrupted communications and power infrastructure, the entire network collapsed, rather than degrading gracefully. The intelligence dimension of the American victory was perhaps even more significant than the technological triumph, and it exposed catastrophic failures by Russian and Chinese intelligence services. The CIA's ability to place a source inside Maduro's inner circle represented years of patient cultivation and tradecraft that Moscow and Beijing completely failed to detect or counter. For months, American aircraft carriers, fighter jets, and thousands of troops had been openly deploying to the Caribbean in what was clearly preparation for military action. Yet Russian intelligence, the same SVR and GRU that pride themselves on understanding American intentions, completely misread the situation unfolding before their eyes. Moscow apparently believed the American buildup was merely a pressure campaign or negotiating tactic, not preparation for an actual decapitation strike against their ally. Chinese intelligence proved equally blind, failing to warn Venezuela that the United States was serious about using military force to capture Maduro. Both Russia and China had military advisors, intelligence officers, and technical specialists stationed in Venezuela to support the air defense systems they had sold. These personnel had front-row seats to the American buildup, yet their reports to Moscow and Beijing apparently failed to convey the imminent danger Maduro faced. American spy satellites and reconnaissance aircraft had mapped every radar installation, communications node, and potential target months before the operation commenced. The military buildup in the Caribbean served multiple intelligence purposes beyond simply positioning forces for the eventual strike against the Venezuelan government. By flying aircraft near Venezuelan airspace, American forces provoked reactions that revealed how the defense network operated and where critical vulnerabilities existed. Each Venezuelan radar activation provided data on frequencies, scanning patterns, and coverage gaps that would prove crucial during the actual attack. Russian and Chinese intelligence should have recognized this pattern. It was the same probing strategy America had used before operations in Iraq, Libya, and Syria. Instead, they apparently dismissed the American activity as routine exercises or psychological pressure rather than genuine preparation for war. The failure was not merely technological, it was a comprehensive intelligence defeat that left Russia and China blindsided by an operation they should have anticipated. The operation against Maduro did not end with his capture. American forces continued to demonstrate dominance over Venezuela's supposedly protected waters. The United States had established a naval blockade targeting sanctioned oil tankers attempting to enter or leave Venezuelan ports weeks before the strike. One vessel, the Bella One, became a symbol of American determination to enforce this blockade against any resistance from Russia or its allies. The tanker, which had been transporting sanctioned oil for Venezuela, Iran, and Russia, attempted to evade American forces by fleeing across the Atlantic Ocean. As the Coast Guard pursued the vessel, its crew attempted desperate measures, repainting the ship's name and raising a Russian flag mid-voyage. Russia granted the tanker, now renamed Marinera, temporary permission to sail under its flag in an attempt to provide Moscow's diplomatic and military protection. The Russian Navy reportedly dispatched a submarine and several warships to escort the tanker as it fled toward Europe through the North Atlantic. But on January 7, 2026, U.S. Navy SEALs boarded and seized the vessel roughly 190 miles south of Iceland, despite the Russian presence. The Russian military assets in the vicinity could not prevent American special operators from capturing the tanker and detaining its entire crew. This seizure, conducted in the face of Russian naval forces, sent yet another message about American willingness to enforce its interests regardless of opposition. The capture of Maduro and the comprehensive failure of Russian and Chinese systems have profound implications for the global balance of power. Countries that have purchased Russian air defense systems are now questioning whether these weapons can actually protect them against Western military force. Prospective buyers of Chinese military equipment must wonder whether Beijing's claims about system capabilities will survive contact with American electronic warfare. But beyond the hardware failures, potential customers must now question whether Russian and Chinese intelligence can even warn them when an attack is coming. Russia's ability to market itself as a reliable security partner has suffered a devastating blow. Their systems failed, and their intelligence failed to predict the strike. The Kremlin's air defense systems were supposed to demonstrate that countries could resist American power by purchasing Russian military hardware. Instead, every recent test of these systems against serious Western opposition has ended in their complete and humiliating failure. For China, the Venezuela debacle raises uncomfortable questions about whether its military equipment can perform in actual combat conditions against American forces. Chinese intelligence analysts who failed to predict the American operation must now explain to Beijing how they missed such an obvious military buildup. Taiwan, which faces the possibility of Chinese invasion, must be carefully studying how American forces defeated systems that Beijing also fields domestically. The operation demonstrated that American intelligence capabilities, electronic warfare superiority, and stealth technology combined to create an overwhelming advantage. No matter how much money adversaries spend on defensive systems, the United States can penetrate those defenses when it chooses to do so. And no matter how many intelligence officers Russia and China deploy, they apparently cannot predict or prevent American military operations against their allies. The capture of Nicolás Maduro was not merely the arrest of an indicted narco-terrorist. It was a demonstration of American power that humiliated Moscow and Beijing. Operation Absolute Resolve proved that in the 21st century, technological superiority and intelligence dominance can overcome even the most heavily defended targets. The message to America's adversaries was clear. Russian air defenses cannot protect you, Chinese radars cannot detect us, and your intelligence services cannot save you. Russia and China watched helplessly as their ally was dragged from his bed, their weapons rendered useless, their intelligence proven worthless. This was how the United States actually defeated Russia, China, and Iran, through decisive demonstration of capabilities they cannot match and failures they cannot hide. If you found this perspective valuable, consider subscribing. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. Thank you for watching.